The following program contains discussion of EN server story content, which will contain some spoilers. Viewer discretion is advised. Ask and thou shalt receive. Some of you lovely folks wanted a Bachelorette version of the Bachelor video, so here it is in all of its glory. Since Twisted Wonderland is a game focused on the struggles of youth in an all-boys school, there are slim pickings when it comes to Bachelorettes. In fact, of all the adult ladies we've been introduced to so far, there is only one who is for sure canonically single. Marsha's husband is still alive if Ethel's to be believed. Malinor's husband may or may not be alive, but she wouldn't even let other Fae rulers get close to her if Lilia's to be believed. So what chance do any of us have? The Fairy Queen presumably has a king, but even if she doesn't, if she's anything like Queen Clarion, she probably already has a sweetheart. And Eliza is such a gray area, I wasn't sure I wanted to include her, but her event does center around her being a bachelorette. However, in the end, she does get married, so technically she's off the table. All that leaves us with is Dia, who is a fantastic gal, but what story is there if she wins by default? Ranking just one person isn't very fun, is it? So for this video, a lot of liberties are going to be taken concerning these gals. We're going to be assuming that, in an alternate universe, Twisted Wonderland is an otome game, focused on these four who are, in that context, single, ready to mingle, and most importantly, adults. Just like in the previous video, we are going to be saving the worst for last, so get comfy, grab a snack, and hear me out for just a second regarding the Fairy Queen. I'm excluding the Fairy Queen instead of Eliza because of one simple factor: information. The Fairy Queen, while technically the center plot point of her events, doesn't talk at all in the first Fairy Gala, and talks very little in the second. We don't get much information about her outside of that interaction, so I don't have much to talk about. I could assume that she acts like Queen Clarion, but then this video would be analyzing Queen Clarion instead of Twisted Wonderland's Fairy Queen, and that's just not the point. We get way more information about Eliza during her event, so I actually have things to talk about regarding her, and boy oh boy do I have some thoughts. But before I get ahead of myself, let us see who takes the number 3 slot. Absolute legend Malinor Draconia is coming in at number 3, which may be surprising, but there's just so much I'm unsure about with her that I don't feel comfortable ranking her higher. Part of the reason she's ranked so low is because even in an alternative universe, I see her being a very difficult person to get close to. There are several factors impeding your romantic success, but the biggest is probably her status. Since she's Fae royalty, you'd have to meet her under very specific circumstances, and even in those circumstances, you'd still have to catch her eye. If you happen to be a noble, there could be more opportunities to meet, but that would also depend on your respective nation's relationships, and even if you do meet, the line between romance and diplomacy could be hard to cross. If you were a commoner, I imagine even getting a glimpse of Malinor would be extremely difficult, let alone getting the chance to talk to her. In the otome game sphere, I think that the most reasonable route she would have is one similar to what happens between Jasmine and Aladdin. She might sneak out of the castle and away from her guards to seek out some excitement or a bit of peace. Then she'd stumble into some sort of situation or cross you, but either way, this would end up being the catalyst for love to bloom. I think several more sneaking outs and a big dramatic reveal would be the most logical progression, but there are other scenarios I can see being valid as well. Whatever the case might be, I think it'll still be a difficult path for you both. Regardless of your status, I can see her smiting you with ease should you offend her, given how her angry lightning strikes nearly end Lilia and the other guardsmen. Perhaps a fellow noble would not be felled so easily, particularly if diplomacy is involved, but even still her temper is formidable and her power is near limitless. We do catch her during a very bad time in the story, and I have some other thoughts on that too, but given all that Lilia says about her, I can imagine her being fickle more often than not. We can see Malleus unintentionally using his magic to make it rain or snow when he's moody, and I don't think this is unique to him since we can also see him and his mother using the same sort of power when they are seriously angry. I can see Malinor also changing the weather with her moods and then some. She doesn't seem nearly as calm or level-headed as Malleus, at least when we meet her, so I think her temper could become a big issue, particularly within a skewed power dynamic. Outside of bodily harm, she also uses her magic to force the MC into submission when she feels slighted by them talking out of turn. I don't think this bodes well generically because it could also cause a lot of issues in a relationship, particularly during arguments. I think the only way that a relationship works here is if Malinor is genuinely caring about her partner and views them in a better light than anyone else. I do think she has the potential to be kind, caring, and protective, and I don't think that she'd be overly pushy with someone she loves. However, if you aren't the apple of her eye, you'd be in danger constantly. Malinor likes Lilia, they're friends, and they have been friends for a very long time, but that doesn't stop her from trying to kill him and the other guards when they arrive. Despite their relationship, Malinor also doesn't ever listen to him when he gives her advice, and doesn't follow along with his plan when we meet her in the story. I think that this speaks to an arrogant and prideful nature, one that I think the average person would have a really difficult time dealing with, as getting through to her and making your point known could be exceptionally difficult. If you're human, then you'd have to put up with some condescension too. The circumstances we meet her in are very unique, sure, but I have a feeling that even in less serious matters, her stubbornness would get in the way. If your partner were to dictate everything and never listen to your input, then I think resentment is a given, which won't make for a healthy relationship. However, a lot of these negative traits and the feelings I have surrounding Malinor come from Lilia's perspective, which might be skewed, and from the small bit we get to see of her in the story. However, I think it's very important to understand the context of the scene, because I think that given what's going on, Malinor's anger, frustration, and stubbornness are extremely valid. When we meet Malinor, she's already lost her husband, nearly lost her childhood friend, is in the middle of a war, has the enemy on her doorstep, is about to potentially lose her son's life, her own life, or both. War is an extremely stressful situation to be in, regardless of who you are, and to be grieving on top of that and having your life actively threatened is not a great time. She may be fickle normally, sure, but I think given the circumstances, her negative traits are heightened, which is kind of a shame, at least for this ranking. My suspicion is that Malinor is already very well aware that the only way for Malleus to survive is for her to not, and that's hard. Her guards are in no place to fight for her, and even if she flees with them, they may not be able to escape given how swarmed the castle is by their enemies. She sacrifices herself so that Malleus can be taken to safety, the ultimate act of love. Even if the sacrifice was not 100% intentional, I think it still shows the genuine care she has for her family and even for Lilia. Despite trying to kill him with lightning, she does put her faith in him to not only keep Malleus safe, but to hatch him should she be felled, which is a huge responsibility, but also one that ultimately only Lilia can do. Even though she drags us away with force, I think she's not being as stubborn here as she's being made to be. I think she's forcing the situation to ensure Malleus' survival, and I feel this makes her way more empathetic as a character. She's an extremely stressed mom who in the current moment has to put up a brave face for morale, but is also probably a little terrified. I think her overall frustration and air of arrogance is truly a part of her, but I think in the specific scenario it's overplayed to not worry anyone. She does have a soft side, it's just not on display. At least that's my theory, which I think is furthered by her lullaby and when Lilia mentions that Malinor was always soft for Revern. This tidbit leads me to suspect that Malinor can be reasonable, can be at least a little level-headed, and probably isn't as arrogant or selfish as she's made out to be. I don't think she's stubborn to a ridiculous degree, but I do think she has the tendency to be set in her ways. She's not perfect, and I do think that regardless of the circumstances, she is a bit spoiled. But I think that if you met her under the perfect set of circumstances, you'd find a devoted, protective partner. Her strength wouldn't be used to smite, but to protect. Her arrogance wouldn't be used to harm, but to help, particularly if you weren't of a similar status. But those are just inferences I'm making based on the conversations she and Lilia have before we're all dragged out of the throne room. I can't be certain that Malinor has this hidden soft side, but I would like to hope that in an alternate universe, in an Otome game, that she would be this way. I'm sad that we likely aren't going to see more of her given what's happening, as I do think that our introduction is not under the best circumstances. But because I can't be certain of her good traits, she's getting ranked at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is Marja Felmier, the spiciest grandma alive, at least that we know of. Marja is a very interesting character because she's so sweet and so wholesome that you might think that she's just your run-of-the-mill grandma. That is, until you trigger her competitive side. Once that happens, Lord have mercy on your soul, cause she ain't letting it go. No way, no how dare you suggest anything different? You may think that this energy shift would make her similar to Melanor, and while I do think Marja has a tendency to be stubborn, she's not going to be arrogant about it, which sets her apart. She's not backing down because she believes she's superior to you, no. She's not backing down because she firmly believes in her stance, and I think that's a much better attitude to have. It may still make arguments a hassle, but at least you have a chance. On the whole, though, communication shouldn't be an issue with Marja since she seems very reasonable outside of her sledathon dreams. During the Harveston event, we could see that Marja has a good relationship with her family, the mayor, and other townsfolk, so she's gotta at least be personable. She also presumably takes care of her family well too, and she takes care of the boys well as well, making sure they get enough food and rest in before the big race. She even makes their plushies for them so that they can go and enjoy the town, a very kind and considerate thing to do. The only problem with her consideration is that it doesn't fully come into play in situations where her emotions are taking over. Even though Sebek, Jade, and Edia have never sledded before, her expectations are high, heavy, and non-negotiable. When Sebek tears his plushie and needs help repairing it at the rest stop, Marja does help, but also continues to be very pushy about the whole affair. This pressure, along with other unforeseen events, is a contributing factor to Eppel's ultimate decision to make an extremely risky move that could have gone very, very poorly for everyone involved. While Marja isn't directly responsible for this, and I think even without her pressure, perhaps Eppel might have chosen to do this of his own volition anyway, there is something to be said about putting pressure on your family members that may or may not end up leading to less than desirable outcomes. It may be reasonable to assume that she would have high expectations for her partner, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. Marja could put pressure on you to better yourself and achieve your dreams, which can be a wonderful catalyst for not only your growth, but the growth of your hypothetical relationship. However, she could also put pressure on you for things that she finds personally significant that you may not find as personally significant, and I don't know how you would go about navigating that given what we see in the sledathon. That said, though, the only thing that we know she's a stickler for at this point for sure is the sledathon. And that's not exactly a relationship-breaking event, especially if you're not participating in it. I think the best guess we have at how Marja is outside of this event is Eppel. As far as appearances are concerned, these two are so alike that the boys mistake a picture of young Marja for a photo of Eppel. We can also see the two of them displaying the same fighting spirit, and given that their family is so close-knit, I can't imagine Eppel didn't pick up on some of Marja's habits. Eppel, for his part, is pretty level-headed, although we can see that he has pretty strong opinions about certain things, like cuteness or fancy foods. But his angry outbursts aren't completely blinding. He does catch himself every now and again, even without Vil's help, so I'd imagine Marja would be very similar in this regard. Again, outside of the sledathon, I think she'd be a reasonable and devoted partner, given how well she does take care of the boys. As she is now too, she'd have a lot of life experience to draw on and words of wisdom to share that could be beneficial for a variety of different situations and your relationship. Even when Eppel and the boys fail to secure first place, Marja is upset but tempers herself exceptionally well and instead focuses on the positive aspects of the race. Sure, she's competitive and it can blind her, but she does have the emotional maturity to know when to shift her focus, at least after any initial shock. Plus, even when she is angry, she's not being condescending in the same way I imagine Melanor would be. It's almost like Marja is angrier at the situation rather than the people directly involved, which may let you have some influence in the matter. However, for as much as I've griped on this singular point of contention, competitiveness is also a beneficial trait to have. Marja's not going to let important things fall by the wayside, and she's going to fight for what she wants and for what she believes in. This could also include you, and I think it would make her a very supportive partner overall. If you don't mind giving the reins over to her most of the time, then I think you're going to get along just fine. I don't think that she's controlling, at least not from what we can see, but I do think there are occasions where she will be taking the lead regardless, so be prepared for that. However, when she does, I think she would do so exceptionally well, not only because of the good qualities we've discussed previously, but because she has practical experience doing so. She used to be the leader of her sledathon team back in the day and was the inspiration for Edia's favorite Sled Over Heels character. During Marja's tenure on the track, her team won multiple different times, which I think speaks to her understanding of leadership and cooperation. Because of this, I don't think that, even when she is angry, she'd completely bulldoze over you and your opinions. If the situation deems it necessary, I also don't think she'd have any trouble taking the reins over. At the same time, I can't imagine that she would monopolize that power because, as the leader of a sled pack, you have to know when to rest and when to push forward. She's not going to back down from the challenge and has the skills to succeed, and I think that in the context of a relationship, she'd be very straightforward and honest as a result. I can't see her intentionally causing any drama or completely disregarding your feelings, since you have to have good communication skills to be able to lead a team effectively, and clearly Marja was able to do that, so your relationship should be in good hands. If she is competing for you off of the racetrack or has a rival of some sort, I can also see her being a bit clingy. For some folks, this may be a huge bonus, and for others, a huge drawback, but I think it makes her much more endearing. Cute, wholesome granny coming over with a freshly baked apple pie just to check up on you, all the while making sure that the other pesky lady or fellow isn't trying to steal her lady or fellow. I think it could be cute as long as it's not overbearing, and I don't really see that being a problem. Marja doesn't seem like the type to use underhanded methods to get you alone, and I think that if she lost the hypothetical competition for your love, she'd be decent about it. But I do think that she'd be wanting to spend a lot of time with her potential beloved before and after the relationship is formed, regardless. And with that, I don't have too much else to say, except that I feel very comfortable placing her at number 2. She's got a lot of good qualities that we get to see firsthand in the story, plus clingy grandma baking apple pies is just such a fun visual. So with Marja in second, who's coming in first? In number 1 is Dia Spade. Deuce's mom has got it going on. She's all that I think any of us want, and let's be honest, she's the best girl no matter what Edia says about Marja. Dia is a motivated go-getter who doesn't take no for an answer in most situations. However, she does know when things aren't worth her time and when it's appropriate to compromise, which in my opinion gives her a leg up on Marja. Dia may be competitive too, but she's not going to risk damaging her relationships in the process or push hard for a result if pushing would cause harm to others. In a romantic setting, I can see Dia's motivation and go-getter attitude getting in the way of some things, and it could potentially start some arguments. But I think overall there are more positives than negatives. She's able to get things done and has a lot of connections, which could help her and by extension you in a variety of situations. She takes charge and is a good leader, at least from what we can see, and I think if you're fine with being led, you'll end up being okay. Even if you are more of a leader yourself, I'm sure providing her a break would be a very welcome change of pace, and the two of you could work things out to be balanced overall. Dia's so on top of things that I don't think she'd let resentment fester in a relationship either, as I have difficulty seeing communication being much of an issue. I also think that she would call you out on your BS when warranted, but support you in situations where you're in the right. I feel like Dia is such a level-headed source of stability that no matter who you are, you'd be taken care of very well. But I would also hope that you would give this woman a break, because she's been running at full speed for so long, she probably needs some relaxation. You'd also have to understand that Deuce will forever be her priority, so if you're going to be jealous at all, you're just not. You're not. You're out. You can't do it. Goodbye. Dia also has a great deal of fortitude and raised Deuce all by herself, which is a feat not many can handle. Not because of Deuce specifically, although his delinquent days did add quite a bit of stress for sure, but because being a single mom, in any context, is extremely difficult. Having to work away at your delivery job while also making sure your son is getting everything that he needs, time with you included, is tough, but Dia must have done a good job because if she didn't, Deuce likely wouldn't care for her in the way that he does. In fact, we can infer quite a bit from Deuce since he talks about his mom and his past a few different times. In his star-sending robes vignette story, he mentions how his mother always had his back and always gave him support even when the rest of the town was against him. This is further evidence of her being someone who's dependable, since she'd have your back too, provided you're telling the truth. In the main story, Deuce tells us that he wants to improve himself because of his mom, and in doing so, not only wants to make her proud, but happy. Dia brought joy to him, and he can recognize all of her efforts and all of the sacrifices she made when she was raising him, which I think makes her extremely responsible on top of everything else. In his New Year's outfit, he tells us tales from his younger days when he helped his mom score great deals at sales, which Dia would always turn into fun trips to make those otherwise boring memories good ones. Such creativity is also allied with resourcefulness, which is just yet another good quality that Dia possesses. Dia could have pushed for Deuce to get a job early or to sacrifice his dreams in order to help their household, but she didn't. Even when he lost his way and started hanging out with other delinquents, she was still there to support him and provided a safety net for him to fall back on. Even in cases where the monotony of life couldn't be avoided, she found ways to make it fun. I think all of these things show how caring, creative, and understanding Dia is, which I think makes her a very balanced person. Yes, she's a go-getter who can be very pushy, and she's quite dedicated to her job, but she didn't let either of those things stand in the way of her dedication to Deuce. I cannot see Dia as unreasonable at all, and I think that the love and care she put into raising Deuce has paid off in spades, no pun intended. I don't think you could be a bad mom and still have the admiration of your children, and while being a great mom doesn't necessarily make you inherently dateable, I do think it speaks to your positive attributes and lets those shine above any negative ones. During White Rabbit Fest, her interactions with the other boys are also very wholesome, and she makes sure everyone is cared for. She doesn't work them too hard at the tent and lets them take breaks, which is just another point towards balance. I think this also speaks to a lack of pride, at least in the negative connotation. She's not going to force the boys to work with the level of dedication that she has, nor is she getting overly upset with them when they are doing less than stellar. Dia, on the whole, is reasonable, and she's not going to let her personal feelings dictate the matter entirely. While I can see her being determined and pushy, I don't see her ever taking it to the extreme, and I don't see her being one to hold a grudge. I think she's generically optimistic, and I firmly believe that she'd take good care of you even if you weren't dating. She's a force to be reckoned with, but she's not destructive, and I can see her being a very devoted partner overall. This, contrasted with Marja, is where I think Dia really pulls ahead and is why I think that she is the most eligible bachelorette of all. She has the most positive attributes, is the most determined, and I think she's also the most reasonable out of the bunch, so she takes the crown. But that does leave us with our least eligible bachelorette, and boy oh boy is she a doozy. Consent? What is that? That's not in Eliza's vocabulary, and that's a huge problem. You cannot be in a healthy romantic relationship without understanding the basics of consent. In fact, you can't be in any type of relationship without knowing the basics of consent. You don't force people to drink tea, Eliza. You don't do that. You don't forcibly remove people from their homes and make them marry you because you think they're pretty. You don't paralyze them when they try to run away, and you don't assault people just because they don't sing as well as you want them to. Malinor may have been spoiled, but Eliza is on a whole different universe of privilege. She has the entirety of her attendants continuously feeding her delusions, and she refused to learn from anyone or any context. I don't think that she understands the word no, and that's shocking. There are so many problems with Eliza that I'd be exhausted to talk about them all, and the thing that upsets me the most is that she has an entire kingdom of attendants who do not call her out ever. They are all just going along with things, and I think that this might stem from their own selfishness. Her ghost pals want to see her married because they didn't get to see it in life. Okay, fine. But you don't just go along with this whole plot and forcibly end someone to make that happen. I think these ghosts might be so done with having to go through this dating process for hundreds and hundreds of years that once they finally got a yes, they're forcing things to go along just to get it over with. Sure, they could just be extra happy that it's all finally happening, but none of them really have Eliza's best interest in mind, so how can they really call themselves her loyal attendants? To me, this isn't loyalty, it's negligence, and I 100% agree with everything that Ace said in this event. Even Puffy, who we can see during the event get very upset at Eliza liking someone other than him, this is not necessarily a very pure motivation for Puffy either. Puffy loves Eliza, but he's not going to make that known because he doesn't want to, I assume, ruin their friendship, but he's also not calling her out like a good friend should on all of the BS that she's doing and all of the crazy things that she's saying. Puffy, come on. Out of all of the ghost attendants, I feel like Puffy would have had the most chance at actually trying to correct all the things that Eliza is doing, and he doesn't. So him, along with all the rest of the ghosts, are just enablers. Eliza is so immature it hurts, and she has this princess delusion going on where she thinks the perfect prince will just come along and love her by virtue of their mutual existences. She's also looking for the longest laundry list of conflicting traits that somehow all fits Edea of all people. Yes, he can be very pretty. Yes, he fits all of these things. But it's just wild, all of the circumstances surrounding this. Eliza has no idea what actual love is about and seems to just be looking for like a pet that matches her aesthetic instead of an actual partner. There is no care or consideration for this person at all, and it is so wrong on so many different levels. Even when she gives up on Edea and chooses Puffy, it's not because she learned a genuine lesson, it's because her feelings just shifted their target. She delivers a small speech to Edea as she dumps him, in which she reveals that she is still legitimately thinking that Edea is interested in her, despite him denying that through the entire event. Eliza is immature, does not understand how relationships work, and that makes her the least eligible bachelorette of all. How ironic is it that the only lady actively looking for love in the Twisted Wonderland universe is doing so in the worst way possible with the worst attitude possible? It makes me so sad, but if Eliza was in an Otome game, I would hope that her route is her learning what love actually is and coming to terms with her past attitude and resolving to change. But maybe it's better if she was just excluded altogether. And with that, we have our lovely list of lovely ladies. This was a lot of fun, just like the last one, and just like in that one, please feel free to defend or support your faves in the comments below. Do you think that this list was fair? Do you think someone should have ranked higher? Do you think someone should have ranked lower? Well, let me know with a like or a comment, or maybe even a subscribe. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please let me know below. And as always, I'd like to remind you that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.